The first question the emergency room doctor asked was not about my shattered knee or the blood covering my clothes, but whether I felt safe going home, and that single question broke the silence I had been carrying for years because I finally realized the greatest danger in my life had never come from strangers but from the people who shared my last name. As my mother hurried to invent another excuse about a terrible accident, I looked at the bruises spreading across my leg, gathered every ounce of courage left inside me, and quietly admitted that my own brother had attacked me with a steel rod after I exposed a secret that destroyed the perfect life he had spent years pretending to build. My name is Natalie Brooks, and at 30 years old I believed honesty mattered more than comfort because I worked as a financial investigator where uncovering hidden truths was part of my daily routine, even though I never imagined those same skills would one day uncover the darkest secret inside my own family. My older brother, Ethan Brooks, had always been treated like the golden child while every mistake he made was explained away by our mother, who insisted he deserved endless second chances no matter how badly his lies hurt everyone around him. Everything changed on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon when Ethan unexpectedly walked into my office carrying an expensive black invitation box, tied with a silver ribbon, and he proudly announced that he was marrying the daughter of one of the wealthiest construction families in the state after only a few months of dating. I congratulated him with a smile even though something felt strangely rushed about the engagement, and before leaving he laughed, patted the invitation, and jokingly warned me not to investigate his life the way I investigated suspicious financial reports because this time he wanted everyone to simply enjoy the celebration. 2 evenings later I attended a private dinner where I finally met his fiancée, Olivia Carter, whose kindness immediately stood out because she treated every employee with respect and spoke with genuine excitement about building a future filled with trust, loyalty, and honesty without realizing the man sitting beside her was hiding a devastating truth. During dinner an accidental spill soaked her handbag, and while helping rescue her belongings I noticed several folded legal papers sliding onto the floor, including an official marriage certificate that clearly listed Ethan as the husband of another woman whose name I had never heard before. I quietly returned every document before Olivia came back to the table, but the image of that marriage certificate stayed in my mind long after dinner ended because something deep inside me refused to believe my own brother could be living two completely different lives at the same time. By sunrise the next morning I had already decided to verify the records for myself, completely unaware that searching for the truth would trigger a chain of events that would leave my family destroyed, my future forever changed, and my own brother willing to crush my knee just to protect the lies he valued more than blood. The public records confirmed every fear I had been trying to ignore because Ethan had legally married a woman named Grace Mitchell almost 6 years earlier, and there was no divorce, no annulment, and no legal filing that suggested their marriage had ever ended despite his engagement to Olivia. I stared at my computer screen for nearly an hour hoping I had overlooked something important, but every document pointed to the same heartbreaking conclusion that my brother was preparing to commit another marriage while still legally bound to his first wife. After struggling with my conscience all afternoon, I found Grace living in a quiet town less than an hour away, and with trembling hands, I called the phone number listed beside her address because I believed she deserved to know that her husband was days away from promising forever to someone else. Grace answered with a calm but exhausted voice, and after I introduced myself, there was a long silence before she quietly admitted she still considered Ethan her husband because he had disappeared years earlier with endless excuses but had never once asked for a divorce. Instead of confronting Olivia myself, I gave Grace every piece of information I had uncovered because I believed the truth should come from the woman whose marriage had been stolen rather than from a stranger, and she thanked me through tears before promising she would handle everything with dignity. Less than 24 hours later the engagement collapsed in front of both families after Grace arrived carrying official marriage documents, and Olivia walked away from Ethan without saying another word because the evidence spoke louder than any excuse he desperately tried to invent. The following evening happened to be my birthday, and although I wanted nothing more than to stay home alone, my mother insisted that family dinners were meant to heal misunderstandings while assuring me Ethan only needed time to calm down after the embarrassment of losing his wedding. I ignored the uneasy feeling in my chest and arrived at my childhood home hoping the worst had already passed, never realizing the birthday dinner had been carefully planned for a completely different purpose that had nothing to do with celebrating another year of my life. The meal ended in complete silence as Ethan suddenly disappeared into the garage with an expression so cold that I barely recognized the brother I had grown up beside. And when he returned, he was gripping a heavy steel rod instead of the birthday gift he claimed he had prepared for me. Before I could step backward, he stared into my eyes with pure hatred, blamed me for destroying the wealthy future he believed belonged to him, and raised the weapon while our mother stood beside him without making the slightest effort to stop what was about to happen. The steel rod slammed into my left knee with a force so violent that I heard the bone snap before the pain reached my brain, and I collapsed onto the hardwood floor screaming while the weapon rolled across the room, leaving my family frozen in a nightmare they had created with their own hands. Instead of rushing toward me, my mother folded her arms with a look of satisfaction, coldly saying that I had finally learned what happened to people who betrayed their own blood, while Ethan dropped the rod, grabbed his car keys, and walked out without showing a single ounce of regret. After the front door slammed shut, I dragged myself across the kitchen floor inch by inch while blood followed behind me, and every movement felt like someone was driving broken glass deeper into my leg as I struggled to reach my cell phone lying only a few feet away. My vision blurred from the pain, but I managed to call emergency services before losing consciousness, and the last thing I remember hearing was the operator promising that help was already on its way. When I woke up after surgery, bright hospital lights filled my room as an orthopedic specialist patiently explained that my kneecap had shattered into several pieces and the surrounding bones had suffered severe fractures that would require months of painful rehabilitation. He spoke honestly instead of giving me false hope, warning that although I would probably walk again with determination and therapy, my knee would never completely recover because the damage had permanently changed the structure of the joint. A detective visited my hospital room later that afternoon to record my statement, but before I could answer a single question, my mother walked inside pretending to be a caring parent while insisting that I had simply slipped on wet steps outside the house and injured myself during an unfortunate fall. The detective ignored every interruption, looked directly into my eyes, and calmly asked me to tell the truth, in my own words, so I finally admitted that my brother had deliberately attacked me with a steel rod because I exposed the secret marriage that destroyed his engagement. The detective quietly wrote down every detail before asking my mother to leave the room, and for the first time in my life I watched someone refuse to let her control the conversation as she angrily stormed into the hallway complaining that I was trying to ruin the family. The moment the door closed behind her, I realized I had crossed a line that could never be undone because I was no longer protecting my brother's lies, and from that day forward the truth would decide all of our futures. The next morning my cousin Megan rushed into my hospital room with tears in her eyes, explaining that Ethan had shown up at her father's house only hours after the attack and confidently claimed that nobody would ever believe my version of the story, because our mother had already convinced the family that I was unstable and desperate for attention. Hearing those words hurt almost as much as my broken knee because I realized the attack had not only been fueled by anger but was also followed by a carefully planned campaign to erase the truth before anyone could ask questions. A few days later, Olivia came to visit, carrying a box filled with documents she had discovered while packing Ethan's belongings, and inside were bank records, insurance forms, apartment leases and tax papers that repeatedly identified him as a married man despite everything he had told her during their relationship. She apologized for not recognizing the warning signs sooner, but I assured her the blame belonged only to the man who had spent years building his life on deception while manipulating everyone who cared about him. Later that afternoon, Grace quietly entered my room with a small journal she had kept throughout her marriage, and every page contained dates, broken promises, mysterious disappearances, and threats Ethan had made whenever she questioned his lies or demanded honest answers about where he had been, One sentence near the end caught my attention more than anything else because she had written that Ethan once promised anyone who exposed him would suffer for the rest of their life, making it painfully clear that the attack against me had been deliberate rather than an act of sudden rage. My mother returned the following day, carrying a folder instead of flowers, and she calmly placed several typed witness statements on my bed that falsely claimed I had slipped on the stairs while every signature belonged to relatives who had not even been present that night. She told me all my problems would disappear if I signed the papers and supported the family story, but I looked directly into her eyes, tore every page into tiny pieces, and reminded her that protecting a criminal was never the same as protecting a family. As the shredded papers scattered across the hospital floor, the detective stepped into the room after witnessing the entire conversation from the hallway, and she quietly explained that my mother's attempt to pressure me into signing false statements would become powerful evidence, showing that several people had tried to interfere with the investigation. For the first time since the attack, I felt a small sense of hope, because I finally understood that every lie my brother and mother told was strengthening my case instead of saving them from the consequences they had worked so hard to avoid. Physical therapy became the hardest challenge of my life because every small movement reminded me of the moment the steel rod shattered my knee, yet my therapist refused to let me measure my future by my pain and encouraged me to celebrate every inch of progress no matter how slow it seemed. While I fought every day to stand without collapsing, detectives continued gathering evidence against Ethan, eventually recovering the hidden steel rod from a storage shed behind our family home with forensic testing confirming that my blood was still on the weapon. The investigation grew even stronger when Grace reported that Ethan had secretly visited her apartment carrying an envelope filled with cash, promising to pay her a fortune if she would falsely claim their marriage had never legally existed and remained silent forever about their past. She immediately rejected his offer and contacted investigators, giving them another detailed statement that revealed he had attempted to bribe a witness while continuing to threaten anyone willing to expose his deception. As prosecutors prepared for trial, Olivia delivered several boxes of emails, financial records, loan applications, and business documents proving Ethan had repeatedly identified himself as an unmarried man while benefiting financially from those false claims, transforming what began as a violent assault investigation into a much larger criminal case involving fraud, witness intimidation, and deliberate deception. One by one, the people he had manipulated finally chose honesty over fear, and every new witness added another piece to the puzzle, until the truth became impossible for anyone to deny. Months later, I slowly walked into the courthouse with the support of a cane, and although every painful step reminded me of what my brother had taken from me, I refused to lower my head because I knew real strength was not found in revenge, but in having the courage to stand for the truth even after paying an unbearable price. When the guilty verdict was finally announced, I felt no celebration or hatred, only peace, because I understood that lies may survive for a season, but honesty always outlasts deception, and no act of violence could ever destroy the values that defined who I truly was. Looking back, I no longer see myself as the woman whose brother broke her knee with a steel rod, because I became someone who refused to surrender her conscience even when the people closest to her demanded silence, proving that integrity is worth protecting regardless of the cost and that the truth will always find its way into the light. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.